Welcome everybody to the next Backup Monster show. Today we'll have a special guest from the Virtuozzo team, Joe Morgan, and we'll discuss about lots of stuff about the cloud and managed service providers business. So let me introduce and welcome Joe here. Just
Hello,
let me
everyone.
know only also if you can hear me well, everything. So Joe, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, everything's working fine. So welcome, Joe, on the next Backup Monster show. So as we already spoke, so great to have an opportunity to speak with you, especially when we have lately introduced and discussed the cooperation between our companies, so the Storware and Virtuozzo. But before we will go deep dive and discuss the managed service providers business and when in which direction is going, could you tell a little bit about yourself and your journey, how you became the VP at Cloud from the Virtuoso?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. And that was quite an introduction. The bass on my speaker system was rattling my windows. So, but no, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Joe Morgan, and essentially I started out very early on as an MSP. I maybe didn't realize it at the time, but I remember being in middle school, high school, and I was doing computer work for friends and family and teachers at the school district, and actually eventually even got employed at the school district working on the computers there. So, I kind of got an early start in the MSP world. I had a retail computer store for a short period of time and was doing, at home service work for businesses and, individuals on their computer systems. But it was really, I think, kind of where I found my calling is my parents had a web hosting company and they let me manage the server for them. And so I kind of remember that first data center that I walked into and put the server on the rack and was just amazed at all the infrastructure that went into it. And I think that that's kind of what made me want to do this for a living. And so I eventually started selling servers to other people online and doing co-location in these data centers. And then Joe's data center kind of grew from there, which is the data center company that I ran for the last 15 years before coming on board with Virtuozzo. And I really fell in love with infrastructure. I like, the generators and the air conditioning and all the stuff that goes into running fiber and getting connectivity, all the stuff that kind of goes into the backbone of the internet that maybe most people don't see, every day. But it was definitely in that position that I was constantly working with MSPs, trying to help them find ways to, better monetize the services that they were working on, or as everything has shifted to being online, obviously they've had to have major shifts as well. And that's where finding good partnerships with companies like Virtuozzo, where we can, provide those services to customers, really started moving the data center into a more cloud-focused business. And so we started doing our offerings there. And then, I was fortunate enough to be able to sell Joe's data center and come on board with Virtuozzo so that I can take all of that experience and help other service providers through Virtuozzo be successful and build their cloud product offerings as well. So it's really exciting.
So you've never actually went off from the data center, but you changing the role. But I like this approach. What you said, that you're learning the data center to become, let's say, going into the more services, or changing the way how they providing this such as services. And it's actually the one of the subjects for today's discussion, because you started from the web hosting. So how is actually everything changed in the last, if you said 15, but let's take a decade or at least 2 decades, yeah. So from the even thinking point of view, how we build the services on top, on the typical rack servers, and how this services changed, since a decade. So how do you see this change, let's say, or providing the existing MSPs to building something new? Because when I talk a lot with the MSPs, I see that some of them have a, let's say, old school approach, uh, but many of them, they going beyond what's going on right now, or even investing a lot to building something new that will be, let's say, hot in the next year. So I'm really interested how you will take the past experience and what you've seen, and put it into the proper let's say blocks, seen as a VP from the Virtuoso perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So, MSPs kind of have that kind of old school mentality, as you mentioned or talked about it, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think it's very challenging being an MSP, just in the fact that you, at least in the United States, the half of the MSPs are mom and pop shops. So they're very small, focused. 5 to 7 is your average size MSP, or half of the market at least. And so they have to, figure out how to transition from a world where they would going on site to a customer's location, they were billing and getting paid for that single job. They would go in, do the upgrade, and then they'd leave, to now a world that is based around, software as a service types offerings, monthly service offerings, where, they have to transition to reoccurring services. They've had to, transition with COVID to doing remote work for people and people who need to be able to remote work from home. So there's always the need as businesses are trying to cut costs to help streamline processes. And it's difficult, right? As an MSP, you've got to walk in the door and say, I can be your expert for all of these different things that, maybe didn't exist yesterday, right? And then on top of that, you're having to try to figure out how to educate those customers on those things. And you're doing all of that with a very small team. And there's just consolidation in the industry in general that makes it very difficult for an MSP, right? And so the major transition and shifts that I've seen in the industry for the MSP have to be around trying to find ways to do reoccurring services, really figure out a way to transition into making money monthly and creating plans and service offerings that they can build a relationship with the customer and continue to go back and service that customer on all their IT needs, because we kind of live in a whole different world than we did, at the beginning of this, when it comes to everything being online.
So not only the one shots selling the one shot technology for a month, but thinking about the recurring. But what do you see? What's the most right now the common services on US or in worldwide that you're seeing that, say, the many service providers working with, for example, with you with Virtuoso, seeking for? Yes. So what type of the services in most cases they right now providing today?
Yeah, I would say probably the largest service I see is going to be the shift into the cloud. Obviously, that brings all sorts of new challenges. So data protection, which of course I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, where you have to, you no longer have the server on site, where you can maybe do local backups, which weren't good enough to begin with, but now it's full data protection to, migrating these workloads. I think there was a lot of shift to the cloud that was just lift and shift without any real thought put into it. And so now these service providers are having to get a little bit smarter and start building these services around microservices. And that brings a whole new set of challenges when it comes to completely changing the architecture, not only of it no longer being on site from a data security standpoint, but actually changing the way these services interact with each other. Requires all sorts of new education and learning from the MSP. And so I think that's probably the biggest shift that I see, is that MSPs are really having to specialize in specific areas inside of hosting. And I mean hosting not just from web hosting, but to hosting all of these services in the cloud. And it's a big shift for sure for them to change and figure out exactly how to do this.
And Joe, can you tell a little bit about our audience, because I believe that not everybody right now even knows Storware or the Virtuoso if they will find, let's say, for example, our material on YouTube. So if you could remind us the primary goal for today, the Virtuoso. When the Virtuoso comes to the MSPs, what's the most significant value for your offering for them, because we know that Virtuoso experienced most, giving the extra advantage for the MSPs today.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the target audience for Virtuoso is cloud service providers. So these are individuals who want to run infrastructure and build cloud offerings where they can compete at the same scale and level as the rest of the industry. And I remember when I was first coming on board at Virtuoso, Alex Fine, our CEO, he had this sign behind him and it said democratization. And I know what democracy is, right? So I'm thinking, okay, that kind of makes sense. But what does that really mean? And so I just Googled it, right? I went online and I said, what does it mean to democratize something? And what it really means is to create an equal playing field and to give everybody a voice. So I think what's really great about what Virtuoso does is we provide software for a service provider at essentially any level to be able to come in and say, hey, I can compete, I can offer these recurring services, I can be a service provider, or I can just service what you need on top of somebody else's infrastructure or cloud offering or whatever, using the Virtuoso product set, right? And then Virtuoso has got a team behind it to help make those individuals be successful. So that's really kind of what inspired me and got me excited about Virtuoso, is that you can essentially take a service provider who says, hey, I want to do on-premise edge infrastructure for my clients, and we can give you software to be able to build that. Or you can, and sorry, I didn't mean to go into a sales pitch here, but
no worries. I ask you to go with it, so no worries.
Yeah, but or it can be a full cloud service provider who is saying, hey, we're going to build our entire infrastructure as a service, PaaS offering, platform as a service, as PaaS, Kubernetes as a service, or whatever, and then of course we have enterprise clients as well that are using this just in-house. But I think that really the blood behind Virtuoso that gets us really going is empowering those service providers. So.
Mm-hmm. So definitely, the time to market is right now important. And what I also see is because we have little bit, let's little bit deep dive into the technology. So what I would love to see, even with our cooperation, that your technology behind it stays on the OpenStack and the KVM. And this is for me really really powerful, because when we're talking about the MSP in a scale, it's in the end somewhere this virtualization engine will start. They will use the VMware, the Hyper-V, the Zen, XCP-ng, so variety of the different distributions that they're giving them the additional boost. And it's also important from the money that each MSP need to put on the table when they build in the solution, because they always need to put the proper layers, build the whole TCO on top of it, and build this offering to the end users. And I many times seen that the MSP that they rely on, for example, the other players such as VMware, they had a problems because when they scale, they don't have enough space for their own margin or for the channel distribution, etc. So they looking for some alternatives. I don't want to right now, let's say, hit directly to the VMware, because I don't want to say who's good, good or not. But I'm just sharing my thoughts, what I've seen on the market. So I'm really glad that you have an OpenStack and a KVM behind the scene. It's challenging because you, as a virtuoso, do not expose all of the difficulties related to the OpenStack. You take in this, let's say, responsibility, and you build in the VHI infrastructure on top of it. So I also added some sales pitch to you, but this is my personal thinking, what I see in the last months when we say talking with potential customers and partners, and how the platform is working. Because what you said, this democratizing plus the strengths, what do you see where actually, not only right now but in the near future, when will be the pitfalls for the existing MSPs? Yeah, I'm not saying I'm a little bit tell about the margins, so building the profitable business from the MRR or ARR, so more recurring services. Uh, how 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 Virtuoso today helps customers, to more focus on the service level, or the building the SaaS or PaaS services against the lower levels, such as infrastructure on the virtualization engine today.
Yeah, so I want to touch a little bit on OpenStack since you brought it up, and then I'll transition into how we're enabling MSPs through that. But it's really exciting to have a product offering that's built on OpenStack, right? Because a lot of the technology that's been out there has started out as these individual hypervisors that were doing everything locally for virtualization, and then they tried to adapt and build for adding shared storage at a network level, doing networking as a service type offerings or self-service for that stuff. These were all add-ons to their product offering over time, but the core of it got a little stagnant, right? And then OpenStack comes along and says, hey, let's abstract all of this. Let's really make it to where the offering can be customized and each individual piece can scale. It's really built as a infrastructure offering for hyper-converged large deployments, but it was complicated, right? Because that meant that your average person couldn't just install it on a box and make it work. And Virtuozzo has got a long history of being a large supporter of open source, from originally the system containers through OpenVZ and their VHS product offering, to now having our kind of flagship product being built on top of OpenStack, which is, of course, this open source platform. And the magic is that Virtuozzo said, hey, let's package this in such a way that your average service provider can install it and use it. And then we create this front end so that it's easy for them to go to market very quickly and monetize that. So it's really cool that we're building it on top of OpenStack, especially as it's now empowering. A lot of people thought that Kubernetes, when it came to the market, was going to maybe take over, and we were going to see that OpenStack maybe wasn't going to be as popular anymore. And then what we found out, that OpenStack was one of the easiest and best ways to deploy Kubernetes, right? So now they're just using it.
This is what I also wanted to emphasize, because many, let's say, Kubernetes or OpenShift or containers, or let's say nerds and freaks say, the virtualization is end. Most of the workloads will goes into the containers. And what I noticed and read the latest article, right now we have the roughly about the 5 to 7% of the workloads running on the Kubernetes and the other containers, and most of them they're running on the virtualization engines such as OpenStack.
Yeah, at the end of the day, all you're doing is abstracting this stuff one more layer. You're creating these microservices to where this stuff is being deployed in smaller amounts, but it still has to have some type of underlying infrastructure that it runs on top of. And OpenStack is still the best way to create that infrastructure platform that is scalable. So it's really cool. And so how Virtuozzo has taken that and said, hey, we're going to figure out the best way to do the installation, how to do the updates, rolling updates that don't require a reboot, that sort of stuff. That is what allows the MSP to focus more on the service providing side of the business, which is really where their expertise comes into place, right? They don't want to have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. They want to pay based on a consumption model where they can not have to do this major upfront investment. We want to build using more commoditized hardware, server hardware, which OpenStack allows you to do, which means that brings their total cost of ownership down. And all of that just equates into higher margins for the service provider, right? The cloud service provider, they're then passing on cheaper services to the MSPs that are actually interfacing with the end customers. And so it kind of all works together.
When we meant OpenStack, because and we said about the Kubernetes, I've seen that many times the market saying the OpenStack is decreasing and it will die in a years. What I've seen is we have a more and more OpenStack projects worldwide. I don't know how you see it, using of course as a backend technology, but the absorption is this technology is coming back, and the community is doing well right now.
Yeah, I think it's actually maybe a little healthier now than it was in the past, because when OpenStack first came about, there was kind of this competition where you had these large corporations that were building it specifically for their needs, and so there was some division that caused these rifts as to what the direction of some of these projects and one of these services should be. And some of those are now still major contributors, but they're not driving kind of the direction of OpenStack anymore. And so OpenStack has just matured and gotten stronger. And like we were talking about, it's now being considered the best way as the underlying infrastructure for deploying some of these new serverless technologies or these new infrastructure as code or Kubernetes containerization or whatever. It's like those things are great from a developer standpoint or a DevOps standpoint, right? I don't want to have to worry about that infrastructure, but then infrastructure still has to exist somewhere, right? And so I think there was a little bit of hype around the idea that these things were going to suddenly just eliminate the need for OpenStack, which was just obviously not the case, because virtualization is at the heart of it, and this just makes us be able to really scale it. And I don't know of any offering that allows you to scale virtualization across a set of infrastructure that's better.
Mm-hmm. When you said about more concentrating on the services from the managed service provider side, you said about like let's think about grab more consumption. So every MSP would like to grab some customers and give them quite the choice that you don't need to care about this and this. We will take them. We as MSPs will handle it. We unify the platforms. We have L1, L2 services behind the scenes, and of course, what we've seen as a Storware, we always care about the storage, and we consume more storages because of the backup as a service.
Mm-hmm.
And the backup as a service is one of the first choices in many areas when the customers want to start the journey to the cloud, not only as a backup, but sometimes from the disaster recovery perspective. How you see this consumption from the, let's say, bus perspective, data protection in your existing clients or the future demands?
Yeah, it's funny because that is actually the exact road that I see as well. MSPs, I think, feel comfortable starting with backups because it's something that they've always provided, right? We've talked about these changes in the industry, but backups was always, whether it used to be an external hard drive that sat on top of someone's computer to being more sophisticated where you actually have dedicated backup servers to what we see today, where you got, kind of the gold standards of 3-2-1, right? You need to have 3 copies of your data. You need to have it on multiple media types. You need to have 1 copy that sits offsite, to full now disaster recovery, which I think what happened is the MSP said, hey, I understand backups. I understand making backups in multiple locations. Now I can do that as a service, right? So now you get backup as a service where they're getting their feet wet with this reoccurring services and all this. And then it becomes full data protection, right? So it's like, okay, well, what's the point of backing up data that's been encrypted with malware, right? So we need to make sure that the data is actually protected from antivirus, anti-malware, all of that stuff, right? We need to test these backups to make sure that they actually work. We don't want to be in a situation where we go to restore and the stuff doesn't work. And then you get to full disaster recovery because, it used to be that technology wasn't driving a lot of these businesses the way it is today. Now the amount of downtime is huge for companies, right? You can't work if you're remote working and your servers are down and people can't access their file shares and that sort of thing. And so it became necessary now from a disaster recovery standpoint to make sure that they can quickly get back up and running. And the easiest way to do that is using cloud infrastructure, right? And so service providers start with that. And then they start realizing, hey, there's a lot of opportunity for me here in these reoccurring services, and these services that I'm taking more of a position of protecting them and doing this as a service monthly. And then I can go, okay, let's because it's difficult as a service provider when you have to suddenly start offering all of these new types of services that you haven't before, right? So backups is kind of the gateway into that. And then they start realizing that they should be doing that on the hosting side of things as well. You don't need to have your server in office anymore. Let's put it into a cloud infrastructure and then let's rebuild all this stuff. And then they use the same model they built with backups to apply that to host the service providing for the hosting side of things in the cloud as well.
And this is the beauty about our cooperation, because align both products, giving the managed service providers opportunity to build a really robust backup as a service offering. I don't want to say in minutes, but in a really short time of period of time, to help to achieve, with the multi-tenancy, building the dedicated tenant for the customers. They will have also the full features to provide the backup and recovery operation for all of the instances that are running on top of Virtuozzo, on top of specific tenants. So and backup is always great great starting point. And many times when I speak with the managed service providers, saying it's a really good door opener for the other services. So if you started their MSP with the backup, and it's, you build the trust because you rely on the data, business continuity, etc. So if your customers will give you the possibility to provide the backup as a service, believe me, it will be easier to upsell or go on top of the other services.
I'd actually
also,
yeah, I'd actually like to ask what you're seeing in the MSP market when it comes to kind of that full scope of data protection from the customers that you're talking to.
Yeah, so definitely the approach is that let's find out the first way to the DR. So many cases, from the last decade, what we've seen is that we don't want to actually move to 100% into the cloud. So let's start with the DR perspective, and all of the cloud services, the object storage, giving you this possibility. So first of all, what we've seen is that first phase, we go into the DR using the object storages, the less consumption model, which is the alternative way, especially for the cold storage, for the archive data, to keep the data somewhere else. And in case of disaster recovery, we can build the manual procedures to come back. But more often, if we put the more data there, the RPO and the RTO it's a little bit bigger. So right now we're looking much more phase to build some HA, so high availability philosophy behind the scenes. So if customers already started to put the services on the managed service providers, so we seen that okay, so it's not only about the DR, but also the way how we can robust the backups in a cloud. But if you have workloads and the data, then we start into playing, okay, how to automate the DR procedures and how to make it happen that in case of data will fully disrupt or be unavailable on-prem, how to fully automate recovery on a DR side. So this is the major challenges right now, because most of the vendors right now gives you and providing the access to send the data somewhere else. But the key will be the automation or the periodic disaster recovery test. And even in our offering, you have all bundled, and you can do it and everything with the API, with the airbag access to the specific instances. So it's really smooth running for both scenarios, DR side or backup and recovery scenarios. But what I've seen the most challenging is right now not only provide the cloud services, but how to fully automate between what we have on-prem with what we have, for example, on the MSPs. So the automation here will be the key, not only the backup software.
But those cloud services reduce that RTO, right? Because then it's faster to take that data that's already been backed up into a cloud environment and have maybe some stuff sitting there ready to go as a spare that you can recover to. And especially if you've got some automation in the actual backup software that helps with that. So you can start out with simple backups to object storage and then really evolve that into whatever specific recovery objective that the individual organization needs, or increase that over time. So yeah, that's great.
Or even the business decision. Yeah, if we already have this few terabytes on the cloud, there is no need to come back this data into the on-prem, but let's build that my plan B should be in the cloud. even for the couple of days or even the couple of weeks. So because this could be also, let's say, encourage CIOs or the management that, hey, if we move in, if the disaster recovery plan is so robust using the cloud, maybe, and it's working for the short period of time, so maybe it should be not only the plan B, but in the long term, the plan A that we should build on top of the MSP more and more consumption. And I believe it will be natural. I think on-premise will be still in the hybrid mode that we use in the on-prem and the cloud will still exist, but more often we'll see the less tapes, less local backups, more replication, more secondary data in a cloud, and more automation on the cloud side. And these MSPs who will automate these processes will leverage and win against the others when they will compete with the offerings. So the backup, definitely, I'm not only saying as a Storware, because for me it's obvious as a backup vendor to say this kind of the story, but I believe, regardless the Storware, that the MSPs with the robust, let's say, virtualization engine, with the robust automation, multi-tenancy, and the backup offering will always have some advantage against the other players or the other MSPs.
Yeah, that's great. And I definitely say I've seen some of those similar trends. I remember, customers that would use the cloud offering as their backup, and then when they would actually have to run in it, they would see, hey, this actually performs really well. This works really well. Maybe we don't buy that server to replace the one that died. Maybe we just leave it here, right? And so, yeah, I see some of those exact same trends.
So what will be, so Joe, let's always, when I have a guest, we're talking about the past, the present, and always about the futures. So if you would like to take, let's say, the 5 significant steps that what MSP should be, right, let's say, consider it right now to build this, let's say, to gather the pace and build the advantage against the other offering and against the, let's say, the cloud market. So what they should supposed to, and let's say, where the energy should go.
Yeah, you can't be an expert at everything, right? So I think that probably the number one thing you should be doing is finding a good set of vendors that will treat you more like a partner that you can work with, so that you can offer a lot of these different services and incorporate it into your general offering, but then be able to rely on them to be able to help you along the way. So finding strong partnerships with companies that are actually invested in service providers, I think, is probably one of the key ones. And actually, I want to tell a story here. I went to a security conference, and I was kind of excited to meet my peers and see ways that we can incorporate security services into our offerings. And it was a little disheartening when I got there, because most of the vendors and most of the keynote speeches and everything were really heavily focused around these large enterprise type offerings. And when I said, hey, what can your average MSP do with your company to be able to offer services, they didn't have a solution. In fact, they said it's not even worth our time, right? But then you find companies like Storware who say, hey, we're building our offering in such a way that we can take care of the back end of this and allow your average service provider to be successful building on it. I think that's amazing, right? That really is filling that gap, and it's not possible for your service provider to try to do that. And I think that them trying to go down the road of building a solution for every single one of these offerings is just going to be too challenging. And so I would say probably the biggest place where I see is start building a specific niche in the market. Build it with service providers, or not service providers, with software partnerships and hosting partnerships that actually care and have service offerings designed for you. And then I would say, in general, it's going to be around education, right? You have to be able to be educated on this, be able to educate your consumer, incorporate that into your offering so that you can be the leader that you talked about earlier. Most service providers, it's the trust that the customer has in you as a service provider. And so you will have to then be able to, give them correct, informed decisions specific to that niche that you came up with on how to build their specific, needs for their customers.
So variety of alliances. I believe it's a key. To find the proper partners to cope with for the next years, and build this partnership and get the robust communication flow. This also will differentiate for the good and bad. So that's why we're also talking about our partnership. So as I said, as at the beginning, I'm quite excited because it will goes and build a new journey for both of the teams regarding the data protection and the whole VHI stack that you're providing for the existing MSPs. All right. So Joe, any more hints to the MSP world right now from your side before we will end?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit here. I'm trying to think if there's any one specific, thing that they can do. It's just, focus on.
So I will put the question. I always thought, how many managed service providers we have worldwide. I don't know if we do you know there are some numbers.
I actually don't know the number.
This is it's always challenging, yeah. But I think we have tons of them. Not only the average, not only the enterprises, but my goal is right now to that our episode will we'll see not only the few, but they will start to thinking about, okay, what the additional offering we can bring for nowadays business and the future businesses, and maybe exchanging the technology stack will leverage them to think about more about the upper layer, not at the virtualization on the data protection layer. So this is our job, to make it happen, to make them much more robust against the others, and think about the services. So focus what is more important. So build the trust and relationship with their customers.
Yeah, of course, I agree.
So Joe, I believe we are hitting the end. So I would like to thank you for all of the episode. It was a great conversation. Lots of great insights about the MSP market, the approach, and the future. We just want to close the episode reminding that lately we started the cooperation between our companies, so the Storware and the Virtuozzo, providing and leveraging all of those MSPs to build the backup as a service offering based on the VHI technology from the Virtuozzo. We also mentioned about the KVM OpenStack technology. If you just started right now seeing or watching our live, so you can always rewind and see how the conversation went. So I would like to thank you for spending the time with us today, with me. All the best to your team. Like we spoke mostly remotely.
Yeah.
So all of the greetings going to the Kansas City from Warsaw, Poland. So thanks, Joe, and hopefully we'll see on one of the next episode later. But right now, let's focus to provide some good stuff for our partners and the customers.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving me the time to come here and talk about this today, and obviously the cooperation between our companies that really creates that tight integration that makes it really easy for the customer, I think is exciting. So I appreciate it, and I of course look forward to coming on again.
Super. So if you would like to get more information, please find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or just going on our site. So Virtuozzo, Storware, and you will find definitely more information regarding our technologies. Or if you would like to reach me directly or Joe, we'll put in the comments our links to LinkedIn or specific details. So feel free to contact us after this session. So Joe, thank you, and for all of the followers, for all of the people who is watching right now our episode. So have a good day, weekend, stay in touch, and see you on the next Backup Monster show.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.